When night falls, if you step into the deep forests of Tennessee, you won't just hear the wind rustling through the trees, you might also catch a strange growl. It's not the howl of a wolf, and it's not the roar of a bear. It's rough, low, and guttural, like a furious sound coming from deep within the throat, carrying raw, untamed wildness. At first, you might think you're imagining it, but as the sound gets closer, mixed with a pungent, rotten stench, you suddenly feel as though a pair of unseen eyes in the darkness are locked on you. And in Tennessee's dense forests, this isn't an uncommon experience. For more than a century and a half, countless people have claimed to have seen a massive, unidentifiable figure in the mountains. A creature that walks upright, covered head to toe in coarse brown hair, with glowing red eyes that pierce the night. Witnesses say it moves with incredible speed and terrifying strength, powerful enough to rip apart the carcass of a wild animal with ease. They call it the Tennessee Wildman. Compared to legends like Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster, the Tennessee Wildman may not be as famous. But here in the South, it's far more unsettling than any ghost story. Because unlike Bigfoot, which supposedly avoids humans, this creature shows up often near farms and hunters' camps. Some say it breaks into chicken coops and drags off livestock. Others claim it slammed its hairy hands against farmhouse windows, and some even swear it stands silently in the moonlight, watching people, almost like it's studying them. The earliest known account of the Tennessee Wildman dates all the way back to 1871. That October, a 40-year-old settler named John Carr had just split the last pine log into firewood, ready to carry it home to his wife and kids. But just as he bent down to pick up the wood, he heard something, an odd, heavy footstep coming from the forest behind him. Carr's cabin stood on a plot of land freshly cleared, a full 12 miles from the nearest village. Normally, the only sounds out here were the wind, the occasional bird call, and the dull thud of his axe against the logs. But Carr knew the woods too well. That sound wasn't deer crunching leaves, and it wasn't the clumsy shuffle of a bear. No, it sounded more like a strong, grown man, wearing soaked leather boots, stomping down into the thick forest floor. Every step was heavy enough to shake loose pine needles. Carr snapped upright, tightening his grip on the axe handle. Out of the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of movement, a tall, brown figure darting between two oak trees. The thing was massive, towering at least 2 heads above Carr himself. Its shoulders were so broad, they blocked half a tree trunk, and its entire body was covered in matted brown hair that looked like dried grass. He never got a clear look at its face, but he remembered the eyes, 2 glowing orbs, like burning coals, flickering in the shadows. Then in an instant, the figure spun and disappeared deeper into the forest, leaving behind only a trail of footprints sunken deep in the soil and a gust of cold, foul air reeking of rot and animal musk. The next morning, Carr returned with a neighbor to inspect the site. Sure enough, the prints were still there. Huge, 14 inches long, nearly double the size of an average man's foot. Each of the 5 toes was spread wide, and faint claw marks traced the edges. Later, in a letter to the Tennessee Chronicle, Carr wrote, "That wasn't a bear, nor any beast I've ever known. It walked upright like a man, and when it ran, the hair on its back blew in the wind. That had to be the most primitive wild man of the mountains." This was the first time the Tennessee Wildman was officially recorded in print, but it certainly wasn't where the legend began. Before Carl ever had his run-in with the brown figure, the Cherokee people of Tennessee had already been telling stories about the Tennessee Wildman for hundreds of years. They called this creature Yohi, which in Cherokee means neighbor who lives in the mountains. Unlike the later settler tales of a man-eating monster, in Cherokee tradition, Yohi was more like a silent guardian. He didn't go out of his way to hurt people, but he also hated being disturbed. At the Cherokee Cultural Museum in Chattanooga, Tennessee, there was once a handwritten diary from 1830. The author was a Cherokee elder named Ataka. His diary, written in English, mixed with Cherokee symbols, recorded the Yohi stories he heard from his grandfather when he was a child. According to those stories, Yohi's skin was brown, like autumn oak bark, and his hair grew long enough to cover his knees. They lived in caves under cliffs, surviving on wild fruits and deer meat. They even used stones to make simple tools. But Yohi never used fire because they feared that fire would draw humans to them. Ataka's grandfather also taught that if a Cherokee ever encountered a Yohi, they had to stand still, lower their head, and slowly back away. Running was forbidden, and so was raising a weapon. Yohi won't harm those who are respectful, his grandfather would say. They're only checking if you're one of the people who destroy the forest. One time, a hunter from the tribe accidentally wandered into Yohi territory. He saw 3 Yohis gathered around a pine tree that had been knocked down by the wind. That tree was so massive, it would take 2 grown hunters holding hands just to wrap around it. Yet a Yohi could snap the branches with just one hand. The hunter did exactly as his grandfather taught him. Slowly backed away, step by step, only turning to run once the Yohis were out of sight. The reason the Cherokee saw Yohi as a guardian was deeply tied to their reverence for nature. The dense forests on the southern slopes of the Appalachian Mountains had always been the Cherokee's lifeline. There were deer, wild fruits, edible roots, and materials like wood and stone for tools. They believed every mountain and every forest had its own spirit. And Yohi, in their eyes, was the living embodiment of that spirit. His presence was a reminder that the forest wasn't something to conquer, it was a home to be respected. But that sense of respect was broken in the mid-19th century. As European settlers poured into Tennessee, vast forests were cut down, deer herds were slaughtered, and the Cherokee people's territory shrank year after year. In 1838, the U.S. government forced the Cherokee to move west in what history now calls the Trail of Tears. Around 4,000 Cherokee died on that journey, and during this time, the Yohi also began showing up in the settlers' accounts. Only the image had completely changed. The settlers didn't understand the Cherokee language, nor their warnings, nor their respect for the natural world. Instead, they twisted Yohi into a man-eating beast. Stories started spreading about wild men stealing babies or tearing apart cattle and sheep. In 1852, the Tennessee Pioneer published an anonymous article claiming that a farmer's cow had been killed by a wild man. The cow's throat was ripped open and its insides were torn out. But what the article never mentioned was that the pasture where it happened had originally been Cherokee hunting grounds, land the farmer had taken by force. As settlers kept pushing deeper into Tennessee, the legend of the Tennessee Wildman reached its peak in the mid-20th century. And it wasn't because there was suddenly more scientific evidence. It was because of one shocking mass sighting. On August 12, 1955, just outside Greenville near the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, 12 hunters camping in the woods all claimed they saw the so-called Tennessee Wildman. This would later become known as the Greenville Incident, one of the most famous and most baffling cases tied to the Wildman legend. The leader of that hunting group was Bill Taylor. He was 42 at the time, a well-known local guide who knew every trail in the Smokies like the back of his hand. Later in an interview with the Atlanta Constitution, he described in detail what happened that night. According to Bill, their group of 12 had split into 2 teams. One stayed in the tents preparing dinner, while the other went down to a nearby creek to fetch water. Around 7:30 p.m., the men at the creek suddenly ran back to camp shouting, "We need to go now!" Bill assumed they'd run into a black bear, so everyone grabbed their rifles and followed them. But the hunters swore it wasn't a bear. It was something taller than a man, they said. When Bill and the others rushed to the creekside, the last light of the setting sun gave them a clear view of it. Across the creek, standing at the edge of the tree line, was a massive figure, around 7 feet tall, covered head to toe in dark brown hair. Its arms hung so long they nearly reached its knees. And unlike the angry beast they expected, the creature didn't roar, didn't charge. It just stood there, silently staring back at them. For a solid 2 minutes, both sides locked eyes across the creek. 12 armed hunters frozen in place, none daring to move, none daring to pull the trigger. Then without warning, the wild man turned and walked calmly into the woods. On its way out, its shoulder slammed into a sapling as thick as a man's wrist and snapped it clean in half. Only after it disappeared did Bill dare to cross the creek. All they found were a trail of massive footprints, each about 14 inches long, almost identical to the ones John Carr claimed he saw back in 1871. But this time, there was something else. A few strands of coarse, brown hair. Bill carefully collected them and later handed them over to the local sheriff. The sheriff sent the hair to the University of Tennessee lab in Nashville for testing. The results came back. Ordinary bear hair. But Bill and the other hunters didn't buy it. They'd all been hunting for over a decade. If anyone could tell the difference between a bear and something else, it was them. And this thing wasn't moving like a bear. It walked upright. Its shoulders were far broader. And most importantly, its eyes weren't set on the sides of its head, like a bear's. They were facing forward, just like a human's. What made this case even stranger is that the 12 hunters had nothing in common. They weren't relatives, they hadn't coordinated their stories, and some of them didn't even know each other before that trip. 2 were veterans fresh off the Korean War. 3 were local farmers. Yet their descriptions of the Wildman matched almost perfectly. Its height, its hair color, its eye placement, the way it walked. Even the detail about it snapping the tree was consistent across every account. Still, no matter how much Bill and the others insisted, the Greenville incident was officially written off as nothing more than a run-in with an ordinary bear. By the time we entered the 21st century, the legend of the Tennessee Wildman hadn't faded away. If anything, it found new life through social media. In April 2024, a 15-second cell phone video went viral on TikTok. The uploader was a college student named Jones. While hiking in the mountains near Gatlinburg, Tennessee, she captured a blurry brown figure moving quickly through the trees. The footage was grainy, the sky was overcast, the light was dim, and Jones's hands were shaking as she recorded. But you can still make out a tall figure, walking upright, with long hair trailing down its back. Within seconds, it slipped into the deeper woods, leaving behind nothing but a patch of rustling leaves. In an interview, Jones explained she had been walking along a little-known hiking trail with no other tourists around. She said she heard footsteps behind her, and when she turned, she saw the figure about 150 feet away. Terrified, she pulled out her phone and hit record, but her hands wouldn't stop shaking. After just 15 seconds, the figure was gone. Jones also said it made no sound at all as it left. It moved quickly, like a gust of wind. Later, when Jones appeared on television, the station had her video analyzed by imaging experts. Their verdict? We can't confirm whether the video is fake. The figure was simply too blurry. There wasn't enough detail to say whether it was a man in a suit or digital effects. Still, the clip reignited a new wave of Wildman fever. Influencers even flocked to the exact spot where Jones had filmed, live streaming their own hunts for the Tennessee Wildman. They didn't find anything, but they definitely raked in the views. To this day, the Tennessee Wildman remains a mystery. No one knows if it really exists. No one knows if, even if it does, it could still survive in the shrinking forests of the South. But maybe that's not the point anymore. What matters is that the legend lives on, reminding us that humanity isn't the master of nature. We're only a part of it. Just like John Carr wrote in his diary back in 1871, "I never returned to those woods after dusk, not because I was afraid, but because I knew something lived there that wasn't mine to disturb."